Hi, it's Edgar Champagne. Welcome into Body Language, the show that listens to your body. What is your body telling you? What is your body saying to you? You might have pains in different parts of your body. That's trying to tell you something, and we've got specialists to help us out. My guest today is continuing my interview with Dr. Emory Alexander, retired orthopedic surgeon. He had fellowships with the Alabama Sports Medicine with Dr. James R. Andrews in Birmingham, Alabama. He had a hand surgery fellowship with the University of Virginia College of Medicine with Dr. Frank McHugh in Charlotte, Virginia, and a spine fellowship at Baylor University. That's big, over in Houston, Texas, with Dr. Jesse Dixon. I understand that fellowships are very important because only about 50 surgeons had this extensive amount of training with orthopedics, and you're one of those 50.
Well, what happens is, fellowships are actually very common. Most surgeons will only do one fellowship. Mm-hmm. And so, say, here in Columbus, we had the world-renowned Houston Clinic, which actually had a sports medicine fellowship. So most of the surgeons there were sports medicine specialists because they did one fellowship. What I did was I actually did 3 different fellowships. And so what that allowed me to be able to do was to be a subspecialist in 3 different areas. And so in that context, there probably were less than 50 surgeons around the country who have done 3 different fellowships, who are experts in 3 different subspecialties of orthopedics.
Wow. Well, last week we ended on our show talking about the lumbar system, which is the lower back.
Yes.
Now, you remember in the first part of the show when you were saying that there's a certain amount of pressure we put on our joints, on our ankles and our knees and what have you?
Yes.
Well, if you're running, you got some pressure on that back and the spine as well, correct, Doc?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
And so I got a friend who had to have back surgery, mm-hmm. and he said it's very, very technical. It's extensive for you all to go into a person's back and work on the spine.
Yes.
Because that could paralyze a person.
Yes.
But talk about the intensity and the workings of a spine operation, orthopedic spine operation.
Well, spine surgery is actually done by orthopedic surgeons who are fellowship trained in spine surgery, and it's also done by neurosurgeons who are also fellowship trained and trained in their residencies to do spine surgery. So we both are able to do that type of surgery. In my case, the spine surgery itself is going to be anything from the cervical spine, which is the neck, which we had talked about earlier with cervical stenosis, or it can actually be in any other part of the spine. It could be in the thoracic spine, which is up near the rib cage and extending down to just below the rib cage. It could be in the lumbar spine, which is in the lower part of the back, and of course, and then it could be in the sacrum, which are the last 5 fused vertebrae. So what we have to do is be able to go in if there are structures that are compromising the integrity of the spinal cord, compromising the integrity of the nerves that are coming off the spinal cord, which may cause weakness or numbness or tingling or loss of bladder or bowel function, then we actually have to be able to go in and dissect the impinging elements away from the spinal cord, or decompress the spinal cord, if you will, and then at the same time maintain the biomechanical and structural balance of the spinal cord, of the spinal canal, so that patients are able to function afterwards.
When you all finish that, there's therapy afterwards.
Yes.
And how do you get a person to really buy into the fact that, listen, if you don't do this, my work, it's not going to be as good as you thought it should be?
Yeah.
What do you all say to people like that? How do you convince people the importance of that therapy and doing it right?
Well, I'll tell you, Edgar, the most important thing is education. Mm-hmm. And education has to be done throughout the entire process. It can't start at the time just before surgery is being done. So what you're trying to do, as you're treating this patient for this problem, you're going through a continuum process of instruction for therapy, for non-surgical modalities throughout the process. And you're working with them on the importance of doing those things at that time. So I try to be upfront and truthful with my patients. Also, making sure that they understand and have realistic expectations of what the surgery will do, even under the best circumstances. Because there are some times where the surgery is not necessarily going to get them back to normal. But the surgery may be designed to help prevent the progression or further progression of the problem. So it's extremely important to be able to sit down with your patients with every visit and go over all of the ramifications of the surgery, the ramifications of the therapy, and those things that you have to honestly understand the consequences for not doing those things.
Mm-hmm. My guest right now is a retired surgeon, Dr. Emory Alexander. I'm very proud of him because I got a chance to go to his office at the River Center Spine and talk about some of the achievements he was telling me about that no one hardly knew. He's a very modest man. But Dr. Alexander, let's talk about the Onyx Research Group.
Absolutely.
And the corporation. You got a chance to, I guess, find time to carve away from your wife and your kids and everything and go into your lab and grind and grind and grind. You came up with some inventions. Talk about the Onyx Research and what you all have actually patented and put on the market.
Okay, well, I've been very blessed, Edgar, as you well know.
Yes, sir.
And what I was able to do was, as a spine surgeon, you're always working and doing procedures and hopefully trying to determine how can this procedure be done better.
Better.
Most people, just human nature, have that innate desire to want to better something. The difficulty a lot of times is having the opportunity or the resources to do that. So as a spine surgeon, I noted in the cervical spine, remember we talked before about cervical stenosis, there is a procedure that I do, very common procedure, where when there's instability to the cervical spine, or if there's a disc herniation, or there's trauma, and something happened that destabilizes the spine, or if you have to take out the disc, you have to put in some type of disc replacement or fusion element. And then you're going to have to place a plate, an anterior plate, on the front of the spine. As I'm doing these procedures, I'm thinking, how else can I make this better? Most of the implants that we were using at that time, once we put on the plate, we would actually put in the screws to stabilize the plate. And then we'd have to put in a secondary coupling device in order to hold the screws in, to keep the screws from backing out. So once you put the screws in and you put on a coupling plate or some locking device, that's a two-step procedure.
Right.
So I'm thinking, what can I do that can make a self-locking device for my screws, so that as I'm putting the screws in, once the screws are in, there's some sort of mechanism that allows the that allows the screws to be locked in without having to get a secondary device. So I was able to get with a company and with some engineers, and we were able to come up with this nitinol spring-loaded device that I invented. And it actually is incorporated into the plate. And so what happens is, now, once you're placing the screws into the vertebral body, once the screw goes past the nitinol spring, the spring retracts immediately, and then once the screw clears, then the spring comes back and locks the plate down. So now you only have one step instead of two. So I have a self-locking plate. It's called the Venous Anterior Cervical Plating System that was invented with a company called Verticor and subsequently developed by the Amendia Corporation.
Incredible, incredible. I got a question about that, but I got to take a break. We'll come right back with body language. My special guest, retired orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Emory Alexander, dispensing some very, very helpful information for us. Don't go away. You're on CTV Beam.
Families come in all sizes and shapes. Sometimes your friends are your family by choice, or sometimes you're just stuck with Uncle Charles. But what we know is that you want to protect the people that are close to you. But the flu can unravel everything. Your flu vaccine protects you and your family. No matter what draws your family together, protect yourself, protect your family. Everyone needs a flu vaccine.
Are you thinking about buying medicine online? A search for online pharmacies yields more than 20 million results. But which ones can you trust? Medicines bought from unlicensed online pharmacies can be dangerous. You may get a fake drug, your condition may get worse, or you may experience a bad reaction. Don't put your health at risk. To learn how to find an online pharmacy that's safe and legal, visit fda.gov/BeSafeRx. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
Welcome back to Body Language. Edgar Champagne with you at CTV Beam. We come on every week with some very interesting guests. Today, unlike I've ever had before, I got a personal friend. This is really a personal friend. I went to high school with Dr. Emory Alexander, retired orthopedic surgeon. Dr. Alexander, we were talking about Onyx research.
Yes.
And as I just said, I went to school with you, so I can get a chance to come to your office. And
Absolutely.
You unload some information on me sometimes. I'm fascinated. And one day you said, well, Edgar, you know, one thing that a surgeon or any person doesn't want to do is have to go back and correct something. So you invented this particular product we just got through talking about.
Yes.
But let's continue on that subject. You were talking about the screw that is invented, and when you finishing up the surgery, and there's an overlapping effect with this particular screw.
Yes.
Talk about the development of more on that.
Well, again, what this is it's a locking mechanism for the plate. As I had mentioned before, you know, when you're doing surgery, what you're trying to do is be as efficient as you can. And so most of the designs that we were using at that time were designs that required more time to be taken away during surgery because you have to take that extra time for the locking device. And so just looking at surgeries that you've done over the past several years, you realize that there are things that can be done to shorten time and to make surgery more efficient. Now, if you look at most of the locking devices that we have in surgery now, most of them now have self-locking mechanisms of some different iteration. So that's pretty much standard design for cervical locking plates at this point.
You were like a pioneer of this, though, right?
I was one of the people that actually realized that this was something that had to be done. But there were other great surgeons and other great minds who are out there doing the same things.
Yeah.
So they're working with different companies. They're trying to come up with different self-locking devices. And so we all have different ideas about how to achieve the same thing. So it was one of those things where it worked out very well for my implant, because remember, once you come up with the idea, you still have to have it FDA approved. And there also has to be a precedent set to where you're not copying someone else's intellectual property. So to have a device or an idea that is developed that can go through the rigors of what we call FDA approval, and to have it commercially released is a major accomplishment.
It's copyrighted. It means that it's patented and everything else. You own that particular design, and it's been patented.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. However, with the patent, what you do is, as in the case with the venous plating system, you can actually sell your intellectual property, or you can actually have negotiations to have that intellectual property acquired by a different company, which is what essentially what I did.
Okay. And the Aurora group, that's part of Onyx Research?
Well, the Aurora group is part of it. And so what happened was, the venous cervical plating system was my second invention. And that was done in, I think, 2010. My first cervical plating system was actually invented in 2001 for a company out of London. And that was my first plating system. It's called the Survive anterior cervical plating system. So by the time I got to the second plating system, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, as I'm going to different research meetings, being invited to different opportunities to develop and design, I'm realizing that I'm the only one a lot of times of color in the room. So I'm thinking to myself, I need to do something, leverage my relationships in this industry so that I could bring in other gifted, brilliant physician scientists, orthopedic spine surgeons, neurosurgeons, who are culturally underrepresented in that space. So the Aurora group was the concept that I came up with. And the Aurora group is essentially a network of colleagues and friends from around the country who were brilliant, extremely well trained, trained at Duke, trained at Iowa, trained at Howard, have phenomenal ideas, but they're never given the platform to be able to share those ideas and be part of moving the needle in technology. So Aurora was formed by me, and presently I have 32 surgeons in 13 states that are actually doing various degrees of development with different systems and different companies.
Do you feel that your experience of walking through, I think you got 3 patents, correct?
I have three different companies. I'm sorry, 3 different inventions that I worked on.
Yes, sir. All right. So now, with your experience of having to go through the research in these meetings and everything, and being able to go through the patent process, do you feel from your cadre of surgeons that they're going to come up with something to really top the inventions you already have? Is that possible?
Well, it's not even a matter of topping the invention. It's a matter of evolution. You're evolving and changing what is already good to make it better. Exactly. And so, if you look at the way that science progresses, it progresses a lot of times from taking an existing technology and improving on it. And so, and that's what you're trying to do. Because the way technology continues to move, obsolescence sets in very quickly.
I see. It sounds like you're going to be able to improve on this. So where are you approving or gathering or recruiting these particular surgeons and neurosurgeons and orthopedic guys to be a part of Aurora? Where are they coming from?
Well, they're coming from primarily my database of friends and colleagues that I formed over the years.
Okay.
And what I'm doing is developing a very diverse group of primarily, but not exclusively, gifted surgeons in culturally underrepresented populations. So we talk about female surgeons, Hispanic surgeons, African American surgeons. Interestingly, the first surgeon that I recruited for this was a Caucasian surgeon, who was one of my closest friends. I went to him and told him what I was trying to do. Very spiritual young man, wonderful moral compass, and he got it right away. And so he was the first member of the Aurora group. So it is a diverse group of surgeons that basically are responsible for being able to show that there are phenomenally gifted, culturally underrepresented surgeons who can also help move this needle.
Wow. My special guest is retired orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Emory Alexander, worldwide, world-renowned. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back with CTV Beam with Body Language, and we're going to talk about one thing that you don't know about how helpful this gentleman really is. We talked about it just now, but he's really, really helpful, and we'll talk about that next. Don't go away. You're on Body Language with Edgar Champagne.
So they say it's a man's world? Well, I don't see anybody's name on it. While they were out doing their thing, we slowly changed all that. We changed changed all that. Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
Welcome back to CTV Beam. Edgar Champagne on body language. What is your body actually saying to you? We've been talking with the retired orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Emory Alexander. In this closing section, Doctor, I'd like for you to talk about how parents and how students could possibly start on a pathway to becoming like yourself, an orthopedic surgeon. What's the roadmap? Give us a template.
I tell you, first of all, Edgar, there is no template.
Okay.
And it's evidenced by my life. If I just had to count on my setting up a template for myself, I would not be in the place where I am today. I started off as a nurse, wound up going to anesthesia school, becoming an anesthetist, then went to medical school. Then, just through God's grace, wound up having these opportunities to invent or develop. So there was no roadmap for that. But the constant was, this is what I try to get my children to understand when I talk with them, is understand, and what we as parents have to do, is to make sure that our children understand that they are worthy of great things at any stage in their lives. And that means that we have to make sure that they're not afraid to move out of a comfort zone. If you're going to nursing school, there's nothing wrong with going to nursing school, but you want to make sure that you are the best nurse. Mm-hmm. Because being that best nurse opens up opportunities that you have absolutely no idea are there. My going to anesthesia school was because of opportunities that I had in as a nurse that I had no idea were coming. So what we have to do in science is no different than what we have to do with our children. We have to be willing to say there is always something better for them, and we have to nurture them every day and tell them every day that there is something better every single day for them.
Well, how do you get counselors to kind of guide you to the right school? If a person is an A and B student, can an A and B student be a doctor?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
So you got your counselor there and everything. How do they steer you to become a surgeon like Dr. Emory Alexander? I mean, do we go to Baylor? Do we go to LSU? Or what schools are there for that particular person? How do you, I guess, shine the light on that person and graft out their talents and put them in the right school?
Edgar, when I was in high school, I was befriended by Dr. M. Delmar Edwards,
okay,
who was the first black surgeon to come to Columbus, Georgia. He befriended me. He saw something in me. And he took me under wing. And whenever he would make rounds, I would go with him to make rounds. Whenever he would have things to do in his office, he would have me come down. He loved me and believed in me. That was the exposure that I got that allowed me to say, I can do something great. He continued to tell me that. Now, what we have to do is we have to move that forward. There's a young lady here in town, her name is Tamara Huff, Dr. Huff. She's an orthopedic surgeon here in Columbus at St. Francis. Yeah. Tamara started off with me in high school in my office. Same thing.
Wow.
I said, I believe in you. I know you can do wonderful things. Tamara did research. Tamara did research in my office. Dr. Huff did some award-winning research with the governor's honors program in my office as a high school student. That's when she decided she wanted to become an orthopedic surgeon. There's another young man named Leo Moore, who is out in California right now, who started off in my office, was at Columbus State. He wound up going into internal medicine, one of the premier primary care physicians in the country. You have to take our children and you have to pull them in. So the onus is on us. The onus is on the physicians and the counselors who have the opportunity to bring these children in. But you have to be willing to do that.
Talk about your spiritual component of your life a little, in how you've lived your life, and when you have to go into surgery and everything. At what part of the day did you connect with God to be able to go do that important surgery?
Well, you know something, Edgar, I learned a long time ago, just through my journey, that this has never been about me. I have had so many times in my life, through my journey, where God has shown me that the only way that I've been able to accomplish the things that I've been able to accomplish have been through His grace. I've looked around and I've just said, I've had no other answers for that. So I realized that He has a purpose for all of us. My purpose is to serve Him and serve His children through this medical ministry. Every time I go to surgery, for the entire 20 years that I practice, before we had surgery, I prayed with my patients and their families before we went in. And the prayer was very simple. I asked that He allowed me to have the heart and a steady hand so that I don't harm these patients. I also said, Lord, I'm not coming and asking you for miracles. I just want to come in here and do what is pleasing to you. End of story.
That's incredible. That is incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, my special guest has been Dr. Emory Alexander, world-renowned, published around the world, fellowships at Baylor, LSU, other places. Before I go, talk about, in 60 seconds, your involvement with Columbus State University. You're chairman of the board over there. Talk about that.
Yes. I'm on the board of trustees. I was ascended to chairman of the board of trustees for Columbus State University, which is, again, full circle for me, because my first opportunity to go to college was given to me by a major benefactor at Columbus State University, and he was very integral on the board. And so it's just through serendipity and providence and grace that I was able to come back around and be in a very similar position.
When you have wealth of knowledge like this, you have to do it twice. We had 2 shows with Dr. Alexander. I want to thank you very much for coming on the show, sir.
Edgar, you know it's my pleasure, my friend.
Yes, sir.
You know that, man.
You're awfully sharp, too, now.
Thanks a lot, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us on Body Language. Until next time, hey, happy holidays to you. Thank you for joining us on CTV Beam. This is another edition of Body Language.